Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. This series is a great series and opportunity for you to ask your questions. Martin joins us today, and I'll have him introduce himself in a moment. But let me just give you a little introduction first about the series. So next slide. So this series is, as I said, your opportunity to ask our experts, providing a platform for users of Scrum, those new to Scrum, or even those experienced who are struggling and have questions and need help get those answers that you might need. My name is Eric Neighberg, and I run marketing and operations here at Scrum.org, and I'll be your host today, taking you through and helping with some of your questions. So next slide. Just briefly about Scrum.org, we are the home of Scrum, founded by and run by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. Ken continues as the Scrum.org to evolve Scrum, adding new versions of the Scrum Guide, and really helping organizations to better deliver products to market in a more professional manner using Scrum. Creating different training opportunities, certifications, as well as just constantly adding more content, more resources for you to be able to learn and continue and evolve your learning. Next slide. So you can see here some of the offerings that we have in courseware, our Scrum Master training, foundations and introduction to Scrum, learning to deliver Scrum actually as a team. Product owner training, developer training, and how do I scale Scrum? How do my leaders support my teams and our agile leadership essentials, and then Scrum with Kanban. Many organizations are using Scrum and using Kanban. How do we use them together? How do we work together as a team to deliver those products to market? So next slide. So please start asking your questions. You can ask those questions via the questions window in your GoToWebinar panel. You can see here on the right, just click questions, ask the question, and we will start going through and answering them shortly. And with that, next slide, I'll let Martin introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So welcome. Yes, I am Martijn van Asseldonk. I'm Dutch. Don't worry, just call me Martin. It's easier. I'm a software developer, have been for many years, and transitioned into an agile coach and professional Scrum trainer. Started my Scrum career as a Scrum Master and a software developer, and was really hooked. So I continue to do that, and since about a year or 5, I do this as my full-time gig, and I help as a trainer, as a coach, organizations adopt Scrum and making sure that they reap the benefits of it. So I'll hope to help you today with your questions, give you some guidance, maybe my experiences, and help you on your way. So looking forward for your questions.
Great.
Eric,
So
you are ready?
Yep. So Lindsay, if you can jump to the next slide, and we'll get started. So I've got some questions already coming in. Keep them coming. First question is an interesting one, and I know we've seen this quite a bit, is do you have any advice on using Scrum with virtual teams? How you can implement Scrum and work together in a Scrum team when teams are virtual?
Sure. Yeah, and we get this question a lot. And of course, I would like to see teams always be able to connect face to face. This is not always possible. So we have virtual teams and have to deal with it. One of my experiences is that making sure that you have good tools to make sure that your communication is as good as it can get in a virtual way. Of course, we have the individuals and interactions above processes and tools in the Agile Manifesto. So make sure that those tools you in your communication. Team building in a virtual team is also something that's more difficult if you're not meeting face to face. So make sure that using the right tools, video, make it two-way communication. Invest some time in getting to know each other. You're not able to do that physically. So in a virtual team, try to do some exercise, some sharing of knowledge, or also sharing of your personal lives, to make sure that people get to know each other a little better. That having said, also in my experience, what helps very well is making sure that you have clear roles and responsibilities. Of course, when using Scrum, we have clear roles, but make sure that people understand what is being asked of them in their role, what they can expect, what they can expect of others in that role. And agree on your team agreements. So also make them explicit. So people are, even though they are at a distance, really clear on how to work together. And of course, also set some clear goals in Scrum. Make sure that you have a clear product backlog. You have a clear sprint goal each sprint. So each of the team members knows why they're doing the work that they're doing, and know what to work on. So make sure that your communication, even if it's virtual, is as good as it can get, using video as much as possible, and have clear agreements on your goals and on the way you work together. That's what I would do.
Great, thanks, helps. So next question, how have you dealt with conflict between different team members in the past? Things like conflicting personalities or opinions. And as a Scrum Master, how do you help the team kind of reconcile some of that?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Well, first off, of course, I see this a lot in teams. Sometimes the conflict isn't even manifesting itself yet, or it's really under the radar. You just feel that it's there. There's this big elephant in the room. So first off, you'll need to address it. Make sure that people are aware of the conflict. And of course, this really depends on your team culture. The basis of this all is trust. So if there's no trust in the team, or psychological safety, as is used, for instance, in Google, that's the first thing you should address. So making sure that there's trust. Once there's trust, then you can raise those conflicts and make sure that you can deal with them in a way that is constructive and not destructive. One of the things I do when starting a team is making sure that we know what conflicts are and how to recognize them and how to deal with them before they even occur. So make sure that everybody knows what is constructive behavior and what is destructive behavior, and how we want to challenge each other to those moments. In my opinion, although it can help in one-on-one people and to get their opinions to you as a Scrum Master first, and then facilitate the team to go to in their discussion together. So that's what I would do. First, start off with making sure that you have beforehand that you're going to have conflicts probably. So make sure that the team knows that how to deal with conflicts, what constructive behavior is, and build trust in the team. Make sure that there's this psychological safety in the team, so you can raise conflicts in a good way and address them. Or you don't have to address them as a Scrum Master. Ideally, the team can manage this themselves. You have to facilitate the discussion and make sure that people stay on the constructive path in this conflict.
Great. So another question. Maybe we should have opened this with this question from Monica, but I guess it's a little bit about on your background. How did you become an agile coach? How did you get involved in this, I guess, profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, as I said, I started as a software developer. So around, I think, 2005, I got to know Scrum, about Scrum, and tried to introduce in the company that I worked for. And it wasn't before just a few years later that I could actually do it. So first off, I was a user of Scrum. So I was a software developer using Scrum, part of a Scrum team. Then I thought, well, this is very interesting. I was one of the guys who wanted to play a role in the adoption of Scrum in the company that I worked for. So I became a Scrum Master. I did that part-time. So I did the Scrum Master role besides my software development role. But I helped the organization adopt Scrum and helped other teams, my own team, in adopting Scrum. And at some point became one of the leaders in the organization on adopting Scrum. So we created a group of enthusiasts that in this company could spend some time on making sure that the company knew what Scrum was and introducing it in different places, different departments. So we became this sort of agile coach naturally. I became this agile coach after being a Scrum Master. And an agile coach, in my opinion, is the same as a Scrum Master. It's just maybe a deeper or a better way to be a Scrum Master. And at some point, I thought I had to do this full time to become the great Scrum Master I would want it to be. So I moved into a full-time gig, being a trainer and a full-time Scrum Master or Agile coach. So that was my path. And there are different, of course. I have a lot of colleague coaches that don't have a software development background. At one point, I studied also organizational studies to be able to have some more knowledge on, for instance, team dynamics. But I have colleagues that come from different backgrounds, psychology, also some math colleagues. And well, it doesn't really matter where you're from, as long as you have the skills, and you can build them, of course, to be a great Scrum Master. And of course, that becoming a great Scrum Master means that you're probably a good Agile coach as well.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Yep. So we've got questions are pouring in. So what are some of your recommendations for a Scrum Master who's new to an organization where Scrum failed previously, and there's a lot of doubt now, and leadership is even thinking, hey, maybe we should just go back to the way we did things before. Do you have any ideas, thoughts, recommendations on how do they restart? How do they re-kick it off? Yeah. Before you answer that, I just want to point folks as well, and I'll put it out into the chat. There's a great case study on this called Scrum Reboot by an organization here in the U.S. and Massachusetts who had exactly this scenario happen. And what they found was initially they were not adhering to the Scrum values, and the Scrum values were a key part of that reboot. So we've got that case study. I'll put that out in the chat. But Martin,
yes,
your thoughts?
Great. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yes. I would start with trying to analyze why the previous attempts on using Scrum had failed. Maybe there are some key points that weren't addressed first to be able to make good use of Scrum. And I would start small then, doing a reboot on, for instance, maybe only one team. With your help, making sure that they are using Scrum to the fullest. So not only just the mechanics of Scrum, and it's good to point out that you did, Eric, but also adhering to the values of Scrum. So a team that's really able to display courage and challenge maybe the status quo. A team that it's able to together and give commitment on what they're doing and helping each other. So make sure that in this one team you have all the boxes ticked that you want to, if you want to be successful using Scrum. And then as fast as possible, try to create great results In my opinion, this is one of the biggest points of leverage in convincing the rest of the organization that this works. So just deliver results. One team, make sure that everything is in place to do the job well, that they adhere to the Scrum rules, but also know and live the values, and have a group of enthusiasts that can deliver great results. And with those great results, just go into the organization and use it as evidence that it can work, and build from that. Spread it to multiple teams, but start small. Make sure that all the requirements that you need are there, and then just deliver the results. That's what I would do.
Great. So another question, this kind of ties to some of the other things I've seen. I think there's a couple of almost repeated questions. So it's interesting and not surprising that folks are having the same concerns or issues. But I'll kind of summarize this one as, how do you help the business? How do you help management? How do you help leadership to adopt that agile mindset?
Yeah, those are big questions, and they're always coming back, of course. What I would do is make sure that they're there. They know what's going on. That you make sure that they are involved in, for instance, sprint reviews, but also in as a Scrum Master, for instance, making sure that they are trained or aware of what this way of working entails, and what it means for the organization. So make sure that people are involved, not just IT or some other department doing their stuff in Scrum, but also making sure that the people next to these departments also know what's going on. So being transparent on what you're doing. Make good use of your sprint reviews. So invite as many stakeholders as you can. Invite the leaders, invite your business. What also works in my experience is having some clear business sponsors who know what Agile is, what Scrum is, and how it works, and how it can help, and who can help you spread the word in their businesses. So just find those people that are really eager and know what this is about and how it helps, and use them to spread the message and help getting business leaders, management on board. So this is just stakeholder management and change management, and that's one of the jobs of a Scrum Master. Just go out there and make sure that people know what it is and what it can do and how it can help.
Great. So another great question here. How do you help teams or individuals to better clarify their goals and then actions to help them achieve those goals? Are there exercises that you've used, or are there things that you do to help your teams in really getting better clarity around their goals and then defining actions to achieve them?
Sure, and you can have goals on multiple levels. One of the things I apply is, for instance, I create a product vision board with a team that's just starting with a new product or a new project, to set the goals of the product and making really clear who it's for, who the target group is, what kind of functionality should be in there, what type of people are going to use it. So making sure that at the start of a product development or a project, the context is clear on why you're doing this. You could also use something like a business model canvas, something that sets the context of the whole product or project in a clear way, so everybody knows why you are doing this. But it can also be on a micro level. So, for instance, on a sprint, trying to create a sprint goal, help the development team together with the product owner to define, maybe in one sentence, what the sprint goal should be. And that can range from just grabbing together the product items that you're doing in the sprint and try to find some cohesion in that and define that as a goal. But could also be, for instance, in one of my teams that I helped, we had a goal of making sure that and it was an IT team, our builds were for the whole sprint were green. So like building on their quality could also be a goal. So there are different tools. I would recommend a product vision board or a business model canvas if you're setting a goal for a whole new product or a whole project. And of course, use the sprint goal to set really clear goals on sprints on a more micro level.
Great. So this is a question always comes up, and the true answer is whatever works for your team. But I think we'd love some thoughts on this from you, Martin, as far as, in your opinion, what's the best way to do estimation? Is it story points? Is it something else? Do you have a preferred method? And what things have you seen that have worked or maybe failed?
Yeah, this is really what works well, and it really depends. I've had some great successes with all methods that are out there, probably with story points, but also with just counting stories. For instance, one of the teams that I helped was having like most of the stories were of the same size, so like 3 or 5 points in that case. So we decided just to remove the story points and just count stories. Well, that was fine. Worked really well. Was accurate enough and took us a lot less time. I also used t-shirt sizing. Had some great results with that as well. But also just plain story points can work. It's not about, for me, it's not about trying to get as accurate as you can, but trying to find something that works in the end. I use estimations to be able to project, so be able to forecast the product backlog, and as some form of confidence that a development team has in being able to deliver a piece of functionality. And if you're able to do that with whatever estimation technique you use, then just use that. And if you're using something and you think it can be better, just experiment with different sizing techniques. That's what I would do, but I agree, it really depends on your situation.
Great. So in your earlier response, you talked about explaining values like culture and trust as the team is formed. Are there things that you can do up front when the team is first formed to start to prevent issues later on? So are there things that you inject early that help as the team grows and gets working together?
Yeah. Yes, there are. I often start with creating a team canvas or a team manifesto, something that reflects or that is used to capture the values of the team. And as a team, you have to come up with those values yourselves. For instance, I use a sort of exercise based on the Agile manifesto. It's called the team manifesto. To let the team come up with their own values and also make some sort of priority in those. So I'll cut down the list to the 5 or 6 most important values for the team, and also then take the next step in how do we know that this is there, or how do we know that some things are against our values? So what kind of behavior do we want to see, or what kind of behavior do we not want to see? So make that explicit. So make a shared understanding of what are our values as a team, but also of what are the behaviors that we want to see as a team and we don't want as a team. And how are we going to challenge each other when we see things that we agreed upon were not helpful to the team? So make that explicit from day one. In starting off a new team, I would always start with a team canvas or a team manifesto exercise to come up with shared values. So what we find important as a team, and always not just stick with the values because they're most of the time it's very abstract, but make the translations to behaviors. So what kind of behaviors come with that values, or what kind of behaviors do we not want to see, to make sure that that is perfectly clear at the start of the team. And also, as I said in one of my earlier answered, use some sort of conflict facilitation model. So also there, indicate what are, or as a team, come up with behaviors that are constructive in a conflict and which are destructive in a conflict. So you know beforehand that what are the behaviors you want to see in the team and what are behaviors you don't want to see. Doing that beforehand helps in making sure that in this situation that there is a conflict, that you already know what is helpful and what is not helpful. I hope this helps.
Great, thanks, Martin. There are a whole lot of questions out there around measurement and how to measure teams or best ways of measuring teams. Some are talking about how management are just trying to say, all right, you need to increase your velocity. You need to double the number of cards. In one case, I'm reading here, double the number of cards that you deliver, and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm putting some information out there, but would love to get your input on this. And this is about value. It's not about cards. Anytime I've ever seen anybody say double velocity, guess what? Now something that used to be a 3 is a 5, and it all gets we just game the system, and the system gets gamed. It's about evidence-based management and delivering value. So what are some of your thoughts on that? How do you change that mindset? The worst thing that, in my opinion, the worst thing that anybody has ever said is hypervelocity, because Scrum in Agile is not about increasing velocity. It's about increasing value and delivering value more quickly, because we're understanding what customers need, what users need. It's not about just delivering more code. But I'll let you take that forward.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's all about empiricism. We're trying to discover what is most valuable. We're in a complex environment, and we need to discover what value is, and if the assumptions that we have that they're true or not, and be able to adapt our way. So yes, I've seen this before. Of course, there is this need for management to know how teams are performing, and I recognize that. But velocity, of course, is not the way. First off, because it's easily gamed. What you measure is what you get. So as you described, if you want that your as a manager want that your teams perform twice as much in terms of velocity, they will. They just have to adjust their estimations, number of items as well. So I would try to, as a Scrum Master, talk to your management and have a frank discussion about what is really important. Do you really want to measure velocity, or do you want to measure value? Do you want to know how good our product is for the stakeholders, or do you want to have the fastest running machine? Because we're not trying to be the fastest running machine. We try to be the most effective machine. So making sure that we're building the right stuff, and then at the same time, after that, trying to make it fast. But we want to learn fast first. So in terms of convincing your management that this is not the way to look at it, I would say just educate them on Scrum, on Agile, on empiricism. They of course know what is important for their customers. So have the discussion about customer value, about discovery, about empiricism, and probably they have to convince their managers as well. So try to get a big audience there. What is helpful to measure for me in Agile teams is value. Is time to market. How fast are we able to deliver something valuable to our customers? How fast are we able to validate our hypotheses. So how fast do we know that what we're doing is good or not good? How fast are we able to steer away to a different direction? And maybe in some more traditional organizations, how well are we able to predict how we're performing, or how we are going to create create increments, create different releases. So I would say more measure something about predictability instead of just pure velocity or efficiency.
Great, thanks, Martin. And I put out there on the chat for everyone to see a link to evidence-based management content, where there's a lot of content out there on how to start to measure based on true evidence and measuring value and measuring how teams are working, how they're working together, measuring actually the happiness of the team and other things as well. So hopefully there's some information there that'll help.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great resource. Good.
So another question, this is around the sprint goal. Should the sprint goal unite the most part of the work that's planned for that sprint? If we're coming up with sprint goals that are only a portion of what we're supposed to deliver during the sprint, is it really the sprint goal, and what can we do to change that?
It's a good question. For me, a sprint goal unites the development team. So you as a development team have a clear focus on what's important in this sprint. And ideally, of course, most of the work that's in the sprint is linked to this sprint goal. If most of the work is not linked to the sprint goal, then it's a question why only part of why the sprint goal is so important and why only part of the work is linked to the sprint goal. So, but first, it would be the sprint goal for me is a tool to unite the team. So making sure that the development team knows what's most important this sprint, how they can help each other, how they can focus on the most important goal. So not just on individual items, but really have a clear goal on what to deliver this sprint. And that can mean that your items can change, or that items are dropped or are added to the sprint. As long as this goal is still intact, that it's perfectly fine. But again, it would be the main goal to unite the development team, why they are working on the sprint.
Great. So here's another one, and this comes up quite a bit. After sprints started, there's urgent tickets, defects, things that come in, and the product owner has decided to prioritize those items. How do you handle that within the sprint? Should the Scrum team all get together? How do we handle tickets within a sprint that come in during the sprint that are deemed as high priority by, say, the product owner?
Yeah. Well, it's a perfect example of using a sprint goal, where a sprint goal can help. If you are able at the sprint planning to craft a sprint goal, you can hold those new items against that sprint goal. Is this helping the team to reach the sprint goal, or is this just blocking the team to reach the sprint goal? So that would be a challenge also for the development team towards the product owner. So product owner, you say that we need to work on these urgent new items, but we just crafted the sprint goal and it does not link to it. So why are we working on this? And sprints are short. So the question of urgency is something must be really urgent to be picked up in a sprint immediately. Most of the times, if it's just new functionality, for instance, it can wait until the next sprint. So first step as a Scrum Master for me would be making visible, making transparent how much this occurs, and what the effect is on the development team. And as fast as possible, if it's not already there, introduce a sprint goal. So you can have the challenge on each item. Does this help us reach our sprint goal? And then it's up to the Scrum team to decide whether to take it in a sprint or not.
Great. So
I hope this helps.
Yep, this is great, Martin. Thank you. So we've got a question about product definition, and the question itself is specifically around how do you define a product when we're not building software? So in this case, they're doing cybersecurity and systems configuration. So their product is essentially, they're still delivering, in my opinion, a product. The product is the configuration and the security, but would love your input on how do you define a product when it's not black and white. This thing is being delivered to market. So in their case, cybersecurity and system configuration for an organization, as an example.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. I'd say that a product is something that a customer is eager to get. So it's something tangible. It doesn't have to be software. It could be anything. It could also be, well, maybe the config that you're talking about. But the thing is, it should be, in my opinion, you should be able to divide it up into different parts and different items that at the end of each sprint result into an increment that you can review. So something tangible that is valuable for a customer that you can review each sprint. So that could be a software system or part of a software system, but it also could be maybe a hardware product, or it could be something like a document, even for some departments that use have their documents like their strategy documents that they use and have value for their stakeholders. So it's all about value. What is what value is the product delivering? Can you define something around the value that you're trying to create? That is, in my opinion, the product that you're trying to build.
Great. So here's a question. Do you have any examples of say, a team manifesto or a product vision board?
Sure. Yeah. I've a couple of teams that I helped created those. I've not don't have them in front of me, but yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. But there are different great resources also on the internet how to create, for instance, a team manifesto or a team canvas. So for me, I always use as much visuals as I can, create something tangible that you can print out, ideally big, like here in Europe, a A0 or A1 format, and then hang that with the team. So with every artifact that you make, whether a product vision board or a team manifesto or a team canvas, make sure that it's tangible. So I would hang it at the team location. I don't know how to help you more with that. It's just filling it in. There are some resources on the internet how to create a team canvas, for instance. Just experiment with it and just use it. It's also something that's not static. And you should just update it when needed.
Great. There's a great website.
This helps.
Yeah, and there's a great website that some of our trainers have put together and continue to populate and work with called tastycupcakes.org.
Yeah.
TASTYCUPCAKES.org, which is filled with great suggestions. Lots of games and activities and things that teams can use and Scrum Masters can use to help facilitate. So I'd suggest checking that out. Let me, I'll throw that into the chat window as well. That's an opportunity for folks to learn. So we'll send that out to everybody. And let's get back to questions. So how do you support a team that's struggling to split user stories and to fit into a sprint? How do you help them in better defining their stories and I guess really how do you help them in refinement?
Yeah, that also a good one. This is really helping them and giving them some strategies how to slice so different ways to split a user story. And there are some different resources out there. One of our trainers has created a nice resource, Christian Verwijs, about how to use some slicing strategies. So, for instance, you could slice based on workflow steps. You could slice based on type of user. You can slice based on business rules. There are some different ways to look at the product to be able to slice in a good way. So in a way that you still have smaller parts that are still valuable in itself. So vertical slices. So not just slicing on tasks, but slicing on functionality. And I would sit together with the product owner and the development team, go through these slicing strategies, and see if you can use those in slicing the user stories. It's difficult sometimes to slice, and people are inclined to reach fast the conclusion that it's not possible. But really try to stretch them, try to get them to go along, and try to get stuff as minimal as possible. In my experience, it can most of the time it can be made smaller, and using those strategies can really help in getting a good perspective and a good strategy to slice on. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Martin. So the next question, this comes up quite a bit, and I know we covered this a lot in our Professional Scrum with Kanban class, but how do you deal with unfinished product backlog items within a sprint?
Unfinished product backlog items in a sprint. So I assume that at the end of the sprint, those are not finished, and you'll have to put them back in a product backlog. That's the assumption that I have. So you've planned some items, and not all of the items are finished at the end of the sprint. Well, first off, it's something, of course, to discuss in the retrospective. In my opinion, it's not a big problem if some items aren't finished. Sometimes we're estimating, so it's not always accurate, and we're not striving for 100% accuracy. I find it a smell if a team delivers 100% of their sprint each and every sprint, what they planned, because they probably are way too much on the safe side when estimating and taking items into their sprint. But if it happens a lot that a lot of the planned work is not finished at the end of a sprint, that's something to discuss in the sprint retrospective. So try to analyze and see why this is happening. Are there blockages? Are there impediments that keep coming up? Or are there some dependencies that make it really difficult to finish items? Do you find it difficult to adhere to your definition of done because of some of the criteria are really difficult to achieve in your context? So those are things to really analyze in your retrospective, and based on that, as a team, come up with some solutions maybe to improve this. So each and every retrospective and each and every sprint, it should go better. That's the way that I would address this question, this problem.
Great. So here's an interesting one. I'd love to hear the answer to this as well. Liz would be interested in learning about or hearing about a major challenge that you have faced as a Scrum Master, and what did you learn from that challenge? I know you've had no challenges, right, Martin?
Not yet this week. No. That's a good one. Let me think. One of the biggest challenges I had was probably with the team that I held a few years back that not really working culture of well, basically there was really a trusting culture. We had some developers in the development team that were really always being on the safe side, always challenging the ideas of the owners. We had a team that was not getting really along with the product owner. It was really difficult to get them on the same page. Different technical insights. Product owner that was really not technically minded and didn't understand or didn't want to understand about the technology. So that was a really tough one. What I learned there is that we really had to slow down. So really address this. I'm really goal-oriented person. So as a Scrum Master, I would in the beginning try to help them with clear goals. Product owner define a vision, make a product backlog that's really clear, and a roadmap that's clear with a good forecast. Making sure that the why for the development team was really clear. Make clear agreements on the way we would work together, but still there was something lacking. That was not getting the results that I would want to get. So we really had to slow down and really focus on the interpersonal relationships. So with this, I handed this off to a different coach that really took the team into some coaching sessions, just pure, no Scrum, just think of it as big retrospectives to work out the issues in this team. So I would say, as a Scrum Master, I learned there to improve my coaching skills, and I learned there that sometimes you need to slow down to be able to work out things in the team.
Great. So
focus on. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. So are there any tools that you recommend that you've used to help, whether it's help facilitation or helping your teams be more successful?
Yes, one that comes to mind is the RetroMap tool, which is a collection of exercises or formats you use in your retrospectives. Sprint retrospective, in my opinion, is one of the biggest game changers in your Scrum team if done well. Sometimes I see that Scrum teams are a bit worn out by doing the same retrospective over and over again, same format, and using the structure of from the book Agile Retrospectives, which is a great book, by the way, Esther Derby. Using the RetroMat, you can switch up different formats and use different formats to make sure that you reap the benefits of the sprint retrospective. So that's, for me, is a key tool to help having effective retrospectives. Let me see if I can come up with another tool. Well, of course, I mentioned the product vision board. I really like. I also use that in combination with a short elevator pitch, just to make sure that the concept of a project or a product is perfectly clear. I shared the team canvas is something I use a lot these days. And there's probably a bunch that I'm forgetting right now. Maybe I can come up with it later. But there are a lot of resources and tools that are helpful. But those are the ones that I use most.
Awesome. So I want to be conscious of the time box, and we're going to supply all the questions. There's a whole bunch of questions here. So Martin will have those and respond to them directly to you as well. But I want to thank you, Martin, for taking the time today. I want to make sure we're not going over the time. Lindsay, if you can take us to the next slide. So you can continue your learning as well. So we have lots of different learning paths out on the Scrum.org website. Check them out. If you click on resources, you'll see for Scrum Masters, for product owners, for agile leaders, and so on. And these will take you through a path to continue your learning. If you go to the next slide, Lindsay. If go check out the forums, ask questions. Martin and many of our other trainers are out there answering questions, as well as others in the community. It doesn't have to be a trainer. Lots are doing things. So check out the forums, ask your questions, review. There's a whole lot of answers already in there because people are asking the same questions about the same things. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn. Certainly check out our blog. There's a lot of great content out in the resource center, and specifically if you go to scrum.org/blog and check that out, and join the next webinar or our next Ask an Expert, and keep those questions coming. With that, again, Martin, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you to the audience.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Have a great rest of your days. Thank you.
Thanks.